My name's Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face, and Face to Face is broadcast live here every week at AccessTV.org studios in downtown Hartford. And Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask my guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, I have as my guest a person that represents a very instrumental think tank organization located here in Connecticut. My guest this morning is the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach for the Yankee Institute of Public Policy here in Connecticut, no other than Suzanne Bates. Good morning, Suzanne.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, it's good to have you down here.
Thank you.
The Yankee Institute of Public Policy is a think tank organization, basically advocating particular different changes throughout our state. What are some of the main goals of the Yankee Institute of Public Policy?
So we're a free market think tank. We do research and then we share that research with legislators and the public. Some of our goals is we really want a more open road to opportunity for people in Connecticut. We think that the economy here has been slowed down by some of the regulations and the laws that are in place in the state. And so our goal is to make this a freer and more open economy so everyone in Connecticut can succeed. And
your funding again comes from private donations?
We're all privately funded. We don't get any government money, so we have to spend a lot of time fundraising. But we have a lot of supporters here in the state who believe in our mission, so they help us do what we do.
What is part of your criteria as the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach for the Yankee Institute of Public Policy?
So I look for, so every year I spend time looking at the budget, I spend time looking at the economy, I look at what's happening with jobs, and then I say, what is slowing us down? What's holding Connecticut back from succeeding the way we should be succeeding? And then, we do research in those areas. I'll give you for example, the last couple of years, we've had 2 of our largest tax increases in state history over the last 5 years. And yet we're still in these dire straits. And so, we kind of took a deep dive into the budget and said, what is causing this? Why is our budget growing so fast? We're cutting services and yet our budget still grows and we're having these tax increases. So we took a look at state employee compensation, which are the fastest growing parts of the budget. So healthcare for state employees, payroll, the pension funds for state employees. Those parts of the budget are growing so fast that the rest of the budget can't keep up. And so, we did some research in that area. So that's the kind of thing we do. We look, where's the problem, try to identify the problem, do the research in that area, and then share that research with the public and lawmakers.
Well, Suzanne, I know you represent the businesses in Connecticut to go along with the citizens and the taxpayers. Do you feel like your organization has a lot of influence on the legislative body here in Connecticut?
Well, so we actually don't represent businesses per se. What we want is a freer and open market for everyone.
Okay.
So, I think that helps businesses. I think that helps particularly small businesses who are trying to find a way into the market. But do we have a lot of influence? I like to think it's growing.
Right.
It's hard. It's the lawmakers, sometimes they listen to us and sometimes they don't, so I think this year they're afraid of what's happening in the state. And so they're looking for answers in places that they haven't before. So we've had more lawmakers reach out to us this year than we have in years past. But we're in a very blue state. It's, it's more on the liberal side, and we're more on the free market, maybe conservative side. So people haven't always listened to us, but I think this year they're asking us more questions this year anyway. So that's good.
Well, almost you're saying you're more on the right comparable to the left?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're sort of in terms of, we want lower taxes. So where people on the right are more lower taxes and fewer regulations, a more open economy. People on the left are more higher taxes, more government services. We think that the private sector does things better than the public sector in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases. So, but we also advocate for things like criminal justice reform, because we want, just because someone gets arrested doesn't mean they should not be able to have opportunities later in life. So we want, we're sort of open opportunity, free market for across the spectrum.
Suzanne, what are some of the areas right now in Connecticut that you feel needs to really be changed dramatically to get Connecticut back towards a robust economy? I mean, some recommendations you could let people know?
So, we're looking at the state budget, like I said, with state employee compensation. So, we have this budget that is growing so fast, and our tax dollars can't keep up. And then we're losing people. When you look at the number of people who, live in our state compared to 5 years ago, our population's flat. And some years we've actually lost people to other states. That's deeply concerning, because if our economy, if our, the working sector of our economy isn't growing, we can't grow, and we stagnate, which is where we are right now. Our revenues for our state budget are coming in lower year after year than projections. So we are saying, let's take a look at those areas that are growing too fast. Our workforce in Connecticut, our public workforce, they do hard work. We appreciate them, but they're very expensive compared to other states. We pay our state employees a lot more. Our benefits are more generous than other states, and it's getting more expensive every year. So, for example, retiree health care for public employees grew at 13% last year. And our revenues are only growing at 2%. So when you have to pay 13% more over here and you're only getting in 2% over here, you're going to make that up somehow, either by raising taxes or by cutting services. And so what we're seeing actually is both. They're raising taxes and cutting services just to meet the needs of those state employee benefits. So we're saying, it's time to take a closer look at those things that are causing our budget to be so out of control with the growth. And, we're hoping that they will listen to us.
Well, do you feel state government needs to be reduced from the current size that it exists today?
I definitely think there are some places we could streamline the size of state government. I think there are things that, again, like the private sector, we have some nonprofit providers who are doing things better and in a less expensive way than our state government. I think that's definitely something we need to look at. But really, the size of our state government isn't that out of control compared to other states. It's the cost of the people. So an individual worker in our state is a lot more expensive than an individual worker in other states. And so I don't think they feel that way, because it's expensive to live in Connecticut, so.
Is that somewhat to contribute towards the unions being so strong here in Connecticut, that they have a strong, I guess, policies for high wages, good pension systems? I mean, these things cost a lot of money. When people can retire at an early age and you set in certain policies in Connecticut that you can work 20 to 25 years and you're eligible for a lifetime pension plus free health care. At some point, do you feel like this is just catching up with us right now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely, what we're seeing is we put in place these very generous benefits, and we can't afford them. And the risk too to taxpayers with the kind of pensions we have, they have to kind of estimate how much they're going to cost, and they really lowballed those estimates. And so now we're paying the price for that. They're saying, you're not paying enough. You haven't been paying enough for those 20 years, and now you've got to pay more. And so it's pushing other things out of the budget. And, they're raising taxes and cutting services, which is something that really isn't happening in other states. And so, we have to say, why is that happening here in Connecticut, and make some changes. Yeah, the unions are very strong here in the state. And I think that they advocate for their members very effectively. Public sector unions are different than private sector unions, right? So you have a private sector union, and they have someone in management, they've got like, there's sort of a check on their power because it's management versus the union. But in the public sector, not only does the public sector union have, the power to negotiate, but they also help elect the people that they're sitting across the table negotiating from, which is very different than the private sector. So it gives them that extra amount of power. And our unions are very effective at electing people that are friendly to them. So, I do think that's affecting taxpayers here in this state.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Words are well spoken, Suzanne. We up on our first break. Let's come back very shortly. Get into some more issues about the state income tax and some other tax issues that's affecting Connecticut. And I want to get your opinion on those views also.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, again, good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I am enjoying hosting a face-to-face this morning with my guest, the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach for the Yankee Institute of Public Policy, Suzanne Bates, and we'll come back very shortly with part 2 of Face to Face. Thank you.
Finding Peace Campaign presents the 2nd annual Women's Empowerment Conference at Club Vine, 70 Union Place, downtown Hartford, Connecticut, Saturday, April the 23rd, 2016, from 3 p.m. until 8 o'clock p.m. Don't miss the powerful live performances and guest speakers. For more information or tickets, call 860-830-5944 or visit ladyflava.com.
These are the monsters of the road. Ever drive alongside a tractor trailer in the rain? Scary. You're hoping they don't change lanes. Now they see you, now they don't. This monster can crush you in an instant. They may be insured for millions, but you're not thinking of that in a dangerous situation. I'm attorney Jeffrey Dressel. Have an accident, you know what to do. Because this is what we do. 24/7, 11/22.
Again, this is Jonathan Small. I am hosting Face to Face this morning with my guest, the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach for the Yankee Institute of Public Policy here in Connecticut, Suzanne Bates. And let's continue back with our conversation. Suzanne, for a long time, Connecticut had one of the strongest economies throughout the country. And somewhere along the line in the recession from 88 to 89, going into the 90s with the state income tax, many experts feel Connecticut started to really slip and was starting to lose a lot of economic and growth in many different areas. The state income tax had a lot to do with many people's beliefs that Connecticut was really made a bad decision. What's your take on the whole history of the state income tax? You think that was a good move or a bad move?
Definitely don't think it was a good move.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that it really slowed the economy down. I mean, when you think about where Connecticut was in our region, it was the low tax alternative to Massachusetts and New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were attracting businesses and high income individuals into Connecticut that really helped make our economy strong in the 80s. And then we introduced the income tax in the early 90s. And at that time, you see that our growth slowed considerably.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then, the growth in state government has been very strong. Our state government has doubled in cost and size,
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, our economy has not grown in the same way. And now we're actually, our taxes are higher than the taxes in Massachusetts, and they're growing much faster than we are. and New York were at the same level as they are now, and their economy is starting to grow faster because they're just not losing people to Connecticut like they used to be. So it really has deeply affected our economy and our ability to grow.
What about the population decline or the stagnation of Connecticut's population? Some people feel the main reason, obviously, we don't have enough jobs to keep our young people here. Is that, you feel, something that could eventually get solved, that we can create enough jobs here in Connecticut to keep that 18 to 34 demographic?
Yeah, I absolutely think that eventually we can solve that problem. I think there are some real structural issues. You know, part of the problem is our state has been kind of unfriendly to private industry. You sort of have this idea like they're taking advantage of us, private industry. And I don't think that's the case. I think private industry brings jobs. I mean, what our cities need especially is job growth, you know, and I'll give you, for example, like up in Windsor right now, there's a company that wants to come in and bring manufacturing jobs. They want to bottle water. So if there's one thing that we have a lot of in Connecticut, it's water. You know, we don't have a lot of other natural resources, but we have a lot of water. And so this company wants to build, you know, a plant up in Windsor, and the community's saying, no, we don't want you. You know, well, at what point do we say we're too unfriendly to these businesses? We need jobs here so badly, but we reject businesses when they want to come into the state. And I just think that that is unwise. We need to welcome businesses. And obviously, you know, we don't want to pollute our water or run out of water. Just don't think that's going to be a problem.
Well, that's a real controversial issue. Actually, that company is looking to locate in Bloomfield, Connecticut.
That's right,
But the people in Windsor are obviously working, you know, to see if this company can still be located there. But again, I mean, if you look at some of the disparities in our state, even between our cities and our small towns, I mean, you have some serious issues with high unemployment and poverty rates. Does the Yankee Institute kind of look at some of the distressed cities and towns in our state to try to see where those areas could also be fixed?
Absolutely. I mean, we really think that the state has made things very difficult for the cities in terms of there are just so many barriers to entry for small businesses, for larger businesses as well. The property tax rates in the cities are so high, you know, and here in Hartford, you have a higher property tax for commercial property than for residential. Why do businesses want to come where it's expensive to come, right? And it's not just the taxes, it's all the regulations we put on businesses. We make it very difficult for them to come to our state, like this water company that, I'm glad you corrected me, that wants to come to Bloomfield, you know. And when we do that, when we put up these barriers to entry, it's like we're hanging a sign, you know, on our entryway that says, no thanks, don't come here, don't grow here in Connecticut. We've got to stop doing that. If we want jobs, I mean, these are good manufacturing jobs that could be coming to Bloomfield that I think people desperately need. We need that kind of job growth, but we're so picky about who, you know, I mean, it gets a little snobby sometimes, you know, that sort of New England mentality of, well, those aren't the right jobs. We only want your jobs if they're the right kind of jobs. I mean, that kind of mentality, it's old school, you know, we need new thinking about it.
Well, Suzanne, I mean, there's a difference, though, to be honest, when you're talking about certain jobs between high wage jobs and lower wage jobs, because right now, Connecticut is saying like they're losing a lot of high wage earners. And that's causing a lot of reductions in the taxes. And if you look at the history, if you had a thriving, you know, industry base that was paying, you know, 50, 75,000 and up for jobs, and you're replacing these jobs with low base service jobs, you're going to always have a major division. I mean, you're just not going to be able to offset losing higher paying jobs for lower paying jobs. Do some of these areas just look at the economy as a whole, the way our country is moving towards?
I think that's part of it. We've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs overseas, right, to China and to places like that. But I also think that, you know, we need to look at jobs holistically, and we need to say, sometimes we want, you know, the state says we want to make things easier for high wage jobs to come and not low wage jobs. Well, you know what? I think economic growth begets economic growth, and a job is a job, and all jobs are valuable. And I think the person in what we would call a low wage or entry level job feels like their job is important because they're getting money from it,
Mhm.
you know? And I really think what we're missing isn't so much the high wage. We have a lot of high wage jobs. We have a lot of low wage jobs. We're missing those middle class, middle income jobs,
Mhm.
you know, like the manufacturing jobs that would come to Bloomfield. And when you're missing that middle part, people don't have somewhere to move up out of the low wage jobs into a middle income job. And I think a lot of the barriers that we put on businesses and individuals generally, they're slowing growth, low wage, middle wage. I mean, it's slowing growth across the board.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the things that we need to change and do could help growth in all of those sectors, because we need jobs for everybody in the state, right? Not just someone who has a master's degree or a PhD. We need jobs for everybody in this state.
I'm going to have to correct you again, though. The job company that you're talking about, the water bottle company that's looking to move into Bloomfield, most of those jobs, from what I'm hearing, is $11 to $14 an hour. So that's really not high wage, middle class jobs. There might be some at the higher level base, but they're reporting that these wages would be between $11 to $14 an hour. And I'm hearing reports that in Connecticut that you actually need about $40,000 a year to maintain a household, I guess, of four. Is that an accurate statement of the $40,000 a year?
Yeah, I think that's true. So then how do you get there, right? Do you have two parents working at a $14 an hour job? I mean, I think that there are different ways to get there. How do you build up to that amount? And I think when we reject jobs because we're saying, sorry, that's a low wage job, I don't want it here, you're giving someone, you're stopping someone from getting into that entry level position that they can then move up into something better. And even though $14 an hour may not sound like a lot, you know, depending on how much money you make, to someone who's making $10.10 an hour or $9.10 an hour, whatever, I think our minimum wage is $9.60 right now. You know, $14 an hour sounds great, you know? So again, and it's this message we're sending, like, your jobs aren't good enough. We only want this kind of jobs. Well, not everyone qualifies for those, you know, those high wage jobs right off the bat. They need training. I mean, I started out making $4.75 an hour. Now I grew up in Canada, so our minimum wage was a little bit different. But I started out making $4.75 an hour, you know, and learned some skills in those jobs, and was able to move up from there and help myself pay for college. You know, if we get rid of those jobs, we're really taking away that first rung on the ladder, I think, that leads to opportunity.
Well, it seems like to me, Suzanne, we need them both. I mean, you know, you need certain jobs to fit every different particular area of our economy. I shouldn't have to be one or the other, but I don't want to mislead people to believe that if you're creating mostly lower paying jobs, that you're going to be able to offset. And I said this before, you can't replace a $20,000 a year job cannot replace a $100,000 a year job. You have to have 5 people doing the same job for one person. Yeah. And I think that has to be looked. I think everything has to be put on the table. Yeah. And actually, we're up on our last break now, so let's come back with part 3 of Face to Face, and we get into some more issues that the Yankee Institute is involved with.
Sounds good.
Okay. Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I am enjoying hosting Face to Face this morning with my guests, the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach, Suzanne Bates, and we'll come back very shortly with part 3. Thank you. Oh, boy.
Now, some insurance companies brag that they could be on the scene of the accident right after it happens. Whose interest do they have in mind? Yours? I don't think so. You may be one paycheck between you and the street. You have 3 children, work in another town. You need that car and you need it fast. If you have an accident, call me. Attorney Jeffrey Dressler, 24/7, 1122.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I am enjoying hosting Face to Face this morning with my guest, the Director of Policy and Legislative Outreach for the Yankee Institute of Public Policy here in Connecticut, Suzanne Bates. Let's continue with our last segment. Suzanne, I don't know how the economy and the whole budget deficit issues are going to get fixed this particular year, but at some point I'm hearing recommendations that the governor is going to issue out layoffs of up to 1,900 state workers. Is that a good move?
It is so sad that we are here, where we have to lay off people. I mean, no one wants layoffs. I think, if you know anyone that's lost their job, I know people who've lost their job. It's devastating to lose a job. This is not where we want to be, but our budget is in such a crisis, and they have raised taxes. Like I said, the two biggest tax increases in state history over the last 5 years. And Governor Malloy said recently, it's not working. We're raising taxes. We're trying to fill this budget hole by raising taxes, and it's not working. It's not fixing the problem. So we have to try something new. And so he wants to shrink the size of state government. And it's what else can you do at this point? It's what you have to do at this point. We have to get our budget under control. I wish the unions were willing to open up the state employee contracts for benefits. That's, legally, they don't have to open it up till 2022. I wish they were willing to open that up and say, let's pay a little bit more for our health care. Let's pay a little bit more for our pensions so that we don't have to lay off so many employees. But they're not willing to do that. What
about the early retirement proposals? Would that be somewhat of a good fix?
I think the early retirement programs, what you end up doing is saving a little bit of money now, but spending a lot more money in the future. And where our pension system is already so deeply underfunded, I don't think it's a wise move at this point.
Suzanne, some of your strong economy states in the Sun Belt, like Texas, and which is a right-to-work state. I know you lived in a few right-to-work states. The wages are lower, but they seem to grow more. They seem to have a tremendous population growth or tremendous business growth. Is there any chance you would recommend Connecticut becoming a right-to-work state?
I would love to see Connecticut become a right-to-work state. I would. I think that it's funny because you say wages are lower, and that's true. When you compare Connecticut's wages to Texas's wages, for example, but the cost of living is so much lower in these states that actually in right-to-work states, people have more disposable income than they do in non-right-to-work states. So Connecticut is such an expensive state to live in that even though our wages are a little bit higher than they are in Texas, we don't feel like they're higher, because we have to spend more money on groceries and utilities and everything else, our housing, our taxes. So I think that what's happening in not right-to-work states or right-to-work states is there's this free market system that's working. Businesses want to come there. They want to grow. They're able to manage their labor, their workforce in a way that's so much easier. I was talking to a small business owner recently who moved from the northwest corner of Connecticut down to South Carolina. And it was the attitude. He said his employees knew that they had to be invested in this job, where his employees here, like the Department of Labor, would come in and protect them in ways. So he had an employee who threatened to hurt his other employees, and that employee was protected by the Department of Labor. Where down in South Carolina, that wasn't the case. Those people were invested in the job. Now he was paying a good wage to his employees down there, just like he was paying a good wage. He was a small business owner, who was trying to do right by his employees, cared about his employees. But he said, I need to be able to manage my workforce. If I have someone on my floor threatening his fellow employees, I should be able to fire that person. But here the Department of Labor was coming in and trying to protect that person. So it's frustrating for small business owners.
But Suzanne, isn't it somewhat of a risk when you have a right to work state that you don't have the union protections? I mean, a company can basically get rid of you for any particular reason, as long as it's not based on race, sex, and gender. But you do give up a lot of rights that you would have in, let's say, working for a union. I mean, even the unions towards a non-union operation is a difference. Is those risks really that bad that you could be taking if you switch to a right to work state, that you would be losing some of your rights?
I don't think, I think there are so many labor protections built into our laws these days, and state and federal laws. People have a lot of protections. Like, they didn't used to have those, in the early 1900s when unions grew. I mean, people were getting locked into factories and I mean, it was terrible. And I'm glad that unions came in and demanded some of those rights. Now we have a situation where it's tilted the other way, where business owners are saying, I can't even manage my workforce here in Connecticut. I can't it's so hard to fire someone here.
Right.
That they're growing in places where it's easier. And I don't think anyone wants to fire. Once you've trained and invested in an employee, I don't think they want to fire them, I think, but they have to be able to manage. If someone's not working,
right,
then they have to be able to manage their workforce. And here in Connecticut, we make that very difficult. And so, and our private sector is only about 10% unionized. It's really our public sector that's heavily unionized. So it's, 9 out of 10 workers in Connecticut don't have union protections. And I think right now the unions are protecting state employee benefits more than they're helping the private sector. So I don't, and economic growth helps everybody.
Right.
If you don't like your job here in Connecticut, it's really hard to find another job. But in a state where the economy is growing, you don't like your job, you can go to another job, and that's much harder here in our state.
Well, the free market system is definitely a bonus, I think, when you have that luxury of being able to go into something that you're looking to do without having so much restrictions and regulations and things, barriers holding you down at times, the way it can make a person or a business feel. But at some point, do you feel the unions just have too much political clout in Connecticut? I know you're advocating for many different changes, but how do you feel about the unions' strength here in our state? Think it's too big?
I think they're very powerful. And I think, the private sector unions, I think, are probably about as powerful as in any other state. But it's our public sector unions that are very, very powerful. They are, I'll give you for example, I was waiting last year to find out what the tax increases were going to be that the state was proposing. We knew there were going to be big tax increases proposed on the business community. So I was there waiting, and I saw business lobbyists there waiting, and everyone was looking anxious and waiting for this information to come out. The only people that didn't look anxious were the public sector union lobbyists who were sitting, they knew what was coming. They had been shown, you could tell everyone else was trying to get the documents. They weren't trying to get the documents. They'd seen the documents. And it was just one example, but it spoke to me of they're the ultimate insiders in this state. They have the back door that most other people don't have. And I think people think the business community is so powerful, but in our state, that's not the most powerful lobby. The most powerful lobby are the public sector unions.
What about the power of the Yankee Institute of Public Policy? Do you feel you have enough resources to do what you're continuing to do?
Hey, we always would love to have more resources.
Okay.
We're a small shop. We have 5.5 people on staff at the Yankee Institute, so we're small. Especially when you compare us to some of the other groups. But we are, I like to think we're effective. We're small, but we are trying to make sure people to get our message out. We really think that Connecticut has become a place where there isn't the opportunity that there should be. We want everyone in this state to be free to succeed. And right now, I think there are things that are holding people back from having the kind of success they would like to achieve. So we're just trying to get that message out. We could always use more resources, but we are working hard to get that message out.
Do you have any beliefs or any true understandings on why you feel General Electric are going to move their headquarters from Fairfield to Boston? And what's your beliefs on why they actually made that move?
Well, I know people like to say it wasn't because of taxes, but it was. Let's face it. They said, they came out in opposition to the governor's tax package last year. They said, you've got to stop raising taxes on businesses. And then the state went and raised taxes on businesses.
Right.
And then they said they were leaving. So I think there were other factors for sure. I think, Boston has this economy that we want, right? They've got young people there. They've got education happening. But we have a lot of those things. I mean, we have Yale, we have UConn, we have some amazing universities here in the state. We should be growing like these other places are growing. But Massachusetts, which used to be called Taxachusetts,
right,
actually has lower taxes than we do now. And they have fewer barriers. Some of these regulations that are barriers to growth for businesses, they have fewer of those than we do here in this state. So we have become a business unfriendly state. And I think we need to do something about that if we want to grow again.
You think it's any strong possibility that Aetna's could be leaving their headquarters from Connecticut? I'm hearing some rumors that they're actually considering possibly of moving their headquarters out of our state.
I don't know. I don't have any insider info, but I sure hope not. I mean, I think I did talk to someone from an insurance company recently who said they're not moving their headquarters, but they're not growing. When they're adding jobs, they're adding jobs in other states instead of adding them here in Connecticut. And again, the taxes play one role, but it's really these regulations that make it so difficult for businesses here. That meant they were growing in other states instead of growing here in Connecticut. That's a concern. I don't want Aetna to move. I own a home here in the state. I care about Connecticut. I mean, my kids are here. We need to do something if we want the state to get moving again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Connecticut population is about 3.5 to 3.6 million. I don't think it's going to get to be 4 million anytime soon. But I think one thing you don't want to be losing, it's one thing not to grow. And maybe they say that we are really not losing, we're just saying stagnated. But sometimes when you're just competing with a Boston and a New York, and, although we got some nice cities here, Stanford is one, Yale, like you mentioned, but you don't find too many New Yorks and Bostons throughout our country. I mean, those are just two unique places, and they can seem to be like a magnet to attract people. We have the luxury of being in between those two major cities, but we just don't seem to have one like that. And I don't know if that is another factor why a lot of particularly young people are just deciding that they want to see different types of places and more things to do. I mean, sometimes you think that has to be looked into the mix too, media attractions and.
Sure. I do think that, there are certain people who want to move to Boston. They want to move to New York. They want that exciting, but I don't think that's everybody. I think we need to stop using that as an excuse because I think it's an excuse. I think, Connecticut New Haven's kind of cool. I think it could be this great, interesting city if we could get it moving and working again. I think we have cool small cities.
Right.
And there are people that want to be near even a small city. And there are states that don't have a New York that are growing, Ohio's doing well, Indiana's doing well. There are reasons that we're not doing well, and it's not because of our cities. We need to stop using that as an excuse. We should be growing, I think, across the board. We have so many great things about our state, our location, the beauty of our state. I mean, the people, we are well educated, our schools are good. Why aren't we growing? I think we need to really open the hood and have a look. Why aren't we growing? Because it's not because our cities aren't good enough.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, Suzanne, we're out of time. I think we can go a little bit longer, but you covered a lot of different important areas in this particular show. First time having actually someone from the Yankee Institute as a guest. I've had many people from the Connecticut Business Industry Association, but this is the first time I've actually had somebody from the Yankee Institute. And I think you're doing a fine job from what I've been able to, research and actually what I was able to hear this morning. And I wish yourself and the Yankee Institute of Public Policy the best of luck in the very near future.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Okay. All right. This is Jonathan Small. I had actually not only just finished doing this particular program on Face to Face, but getting actually technically close to the 1 year. I started doing face-to-face April the 6th, 2015. And although today is April the 4th, technically, or to some degree, it's almost been a 1 full year. And I've been enjoying hosting face-to-face, bringing, new prospective people on. And my guest this morning definitely brought a tremendous amount of information and knowledge base towards this particular show. And I hope people's out there able to find something very informative about this show. As I say, there's always a lot of good programs you can always tune into throughout today and throughout the week on accesstv.org. I look forward to seeing you this upcoming Thursday on All About You. And until I see you again, for people out there, have a very peaceful day. Thank you.